Okay, hey, it's me, Pete Rogers. This is the book, The French Mind by Watson. We're continuing with the book review. This is part 3. We're going to be talking about the Palace of Versailles, as well as sort of the cultural extravagance and greatness of France. France likes to show off. France is over the top. And I'm going to give you some parallels to the ancient world of Greece and Rome. This, right, by the way, is the Hall of Mirrors in the Palace of Versailles, which was developed by King Louis XIV, the Sun King. Okay, he took the monarchy from Paris to Versailles because he wanted to avoid the Paris mobs. He had had some interaction with the Paris mob when he was younger, and he was not happy about it. So he brought the monarchy. They originally had 8,000-acre estate. So that's where the action was. I went there many years ago. And here's some metaphors to make sense of comparing the ancient world to Europe in the 1600s and 1700s. Basically, Paris and France were like Athens, the most culturally sophisticated place. Everybody wanted to speak French. They spoke French, the cultured people, the aristocrats in Russia. They spoke French, the cultured aristocratic people in Germany, in Britain, etc. Okay, so Paris and France, they were like Athens compared to the rest of Europe. Prussia, which we now call Germany, was like Sparta, very militaristic. Okay, they were the ones, the barbarians that had been able to fight off the Romans, and they were proud of that. Syracuse, where Archimedes was in the ancient Greek world, was like engineering, a little more technologically sophisticated. That's Britain. Okay, and Britain is the main spot where the Industrial Revolution took off, and then it started getting going in France and in Germany, for example. And then USA is kind of like Rome. So Rome was like a big thug compared to the ancient Greeks in Athens. And the USA is sort of like a big thug compared to the great culture of Europe in the 1600s and the 1700s and the 1800s. Okay. All right, so now here is Jean-Baptiste Colbert, and he founded the French Royal Academy in 1661, and it was to develop painting and architecture and sculpture, and it was primarily in the style of neoclassical. So classical means Greek and Rome. Neoclassical means the new version of Greece and Rome, which they wanted to be, and the Italian Renaissance. And remember when I gave talks on England and in Britain, everybody who had a brain in their head wanted to be like the ancient Greeks, because everybody recognizes the ancient Greeks were the greatest thing they'd ever seen. That and the Italian Renaissance. So here was the motto of the leader of the French cultural movement. We should seek to have everything beautiful in France that they have in Italy. Okay? And that includes all this neoclassical ancient Greek stuff. And this academy was located within the Louvre. Okay? The paintings by Philippe de Champagne, a great artist of that time. Okay, so here is Charles X passing out awards for art in a contest at the Louvre in the 1800s. And that's what I mean by the great cultures love painting. And by the way, this is only a Christian thing. Multiculturalism is nonsense. There are no other cultures that are good at painting other than the Christians, okay? What you've been taught in the public schools, all cultures are equal, that is not true. Christianity is far, far, far superior to all the other cultures in painting. All the other cultures, they stink at painting in comparison with the Christians, okay? Because people sometimes say, oh, why do you like Christianity? Isn't religion stupid? No, I think atheism is stupid, okay? All the greatest creations, they come out of Christianity. Why wouldn't you want to be connected to the group that did all the magnificent work, okay? And you'll see this in all the paintings. You'll see this in paintings from Italy. You see this in paintings from France. You see this in paintings from England. It's normal for Christians to love art. It just goes with Christianity. And the Catholics were the one who developed all this stuff, okay? The Protestants initially were iconoclast, meaning they smashed paintings, stupid Protestants. But later on, they started to recover their senses and appreciate great art. And great art, it maintains the tradition of your country, okay? Here's another gallery at Louvre. This is a painting by Samuel Morse in 1833. So, Morse traveled around. He developed the Morse code as well. And anybody who saw all the paintings at the Louvre, they're just spectacular. They're just like, this is the ultimate of mankind to make these paintings. And the greatest one, of course, probably the Sistine Chapel, but they're magnificent in Italy. All right, here's just another painting of the Louvre. I'm showing you all these because in order to understand France, you have to understand that France sees itself as the Athens of Europe, as the cultural superior center. So even after France lost all these wars, like the 1763 Seven Years' War to Britain, they're like, well, you might have won the war, but we're still culturally sophisticated, superior to you. And then they lost, in the Franco-Prussian War to the German-Prussians, so to speak. And they're like, well, maybe we lost, but we're still culturally superior to you. Same thing after World War I and World War II. So anyways, here's some of the galleries in the Louvre. Okay, a spectacular art museum, considered by many the greatest art museum in the world. Here's a more modern photograph. You can see there's the painting of the Oath of the Horatii by Jacques-Louis David. And all these paintings, the RAPE of the Sabines, okay, by Jacques-Louis David. All these magnificent paintings. And look how big they are compared to the people. Neoclassicism was just boldness and grandeur on a massive scale, okay. So again, neoclassicism because they wanted to go back. And here's just, the book, The Da Vinci Code. And there's a lot of nonsense in this book, but it's still a spectacular book. It's magnificently written. It's very, very entertaining. Okay, yeah, Dan Browne lied in different parts of it. And yeah, Saunier, the art curator, I think was a scumbag, okay. But the movie's still magnificent. Okay, not the movie. The book was magnificent. The movie was good. The book was magnificent. Okay. All right, now we're moving into something a little different. Now we're going to talk more about Versailles. This is King Louis XIV, the Sun King, okay? And he lived a long time, 1638 to 1715, but he reigned almost his entire life. He was made, the king when he was only a little kid. And he had a scare where he was almost killed in Paris. So he wanted to get the monarchy out of Paris, and he moved it to Versailles. And this is what I mean by France does things over the top. But originally it was an 8,000-acre estate, and it was just spectacular. Anybody coming into France, you see this. And of course, it reminds you a little bit of St. Peter's Basilica. They moved over there like around 1686. They were sort of fully established, the monarchy there. And it reminds me of St. Peter's Basilica, almost like the hands as you come into the main buildings. But the gardens, the grounds, the fountains, it's all spectacular. I went and visited, and I was in awe of it. It was the most beautiful building and estate that I had ever seen by far in my life. And I went and traveled all over Europe, so I was very impressed by it. So here's just another aerial photograph of Versailles. Here's a painting of it to get a sense of it by Jean-Léon Gérôme, one of the French painters, 1878. You go before King Louis in Versailles, and you see this spectacular pomp and circumstance, the pageantry of it all. It's just beautiful. There's his bust up there. It's quite extraordinary. Okay, and then also to get a sense of the personality of the French, you got to see paintings like this. So here's King Louis with the Royal Academy and the scientists, and they're showing off their learning, their sophistication. They're collecting skeletons. Remember, they had the early biologists that later on, were contested with Darwin and whatnot. They're building an observatory out here for the telescope. They make maps of the world. They're trying to explore some things with their ships and stuff, and they're trying to compete to be a world power with England and Spain. Okay, so that is the ambition and the glory of France. And the other thing too is there was none of this separation of church and state. The Versailles had their own chapel right there. Here's the magnificent painted ceiling of the Royal Chapel of Versailles. Okay, and again, here's the Hall of Mirrors, and just spectacular. The French were great at Baroque architecture and style and grandeur. And the France will tell you, we are the Athens of Europe. We're just superior culturally, intellectually to all the rest of Europe. Okay, and there's also some good reason for France to say that. The real Renaissance, it didn't start in Italy with the Sistine Chapel and, the Medicis and the Pope Julius. It started way before that. It started with, the university system in Paris with Albert the Great, the mentor to Thomas Aquinas, Summa Theologica, Abelard and Eloise, Aristotelian university system, Latin Christendom, University of Paris being the center point. Okay, so they built all the magnificent cathedrals. The outdoor structure of the French cathedrals like Notre Dame and the other ones, the beauty of them, Sainte-Chapelle, Chartres, they're magnificent. They're spectacular. Like they're the greatest architectural buildings of all time in the history of the whole world. So this all came out of France, and the French knew this. And they knew that everybody wanted to speak their language and be like them. They were the cool kids, the high-class aristocrats of Europe. Okay, now here's a painting, too, to catch the grandeur of it. Like I said, too, the way to think of Europe in these years was the church, the Christian church, Catholic church for the French, was morality. It was God. It was, the ultimate in high class and goodness. However, they loved the neoclassical stuff, the ancient Greeks. So here is King Louis's family painted as if they were Greco-Roman gods, pagan gods. He's like looking like Apollo there, okay? And Apollo, just like he was the sun king, Apollo was the god of reason in ancient Greece. He was also the sun god in ancient Greece. Helios later took over the chariot, but it started out with Apollo. Okay, so to get a sense of this, can you imagine modern rulers in the secular declining West wanting to be portrayed as Apollo, as the ancient Greeks? No, they would say, oh, that's racist, that's racist. No, Western civilization came from the ancient Greeks. It also came from Old Testament culture. It also came from Celtic culture, but especially from the ancient Greeks. The New Testament's written in Greek, okay? And they culturally were superior to everything else of the ancient world. And then that led into the Roman Catholic Church, and the Reformation and Protestantism didn't even get going at all until 1517, okay? So that's an important point. It was the Catholic Church built all that stuff up, okay? But this is what they honored. So all the educated countries, as far as they were concerned, the high point ever of mankind's achievement, the two golden ages were ancient Greece in classical times in the 400s before Christ, and then the Italian Renaissance, which really is sort of an extended thing from, let's say, around 1200 to 1600. Okay, after 1600, we'll call that Baroque, and then 1700s, we'll call that sort of transitioning from Enlightenment to you can call it Enlightenment to Romanticism. There's more to it than that, but that's the gist of it. Okay, now here, just again to get a sense of it, this is a statue, made by some sculptors for France, and this is Apollo with the nymphs. But again, that's like King Louis with his ladies in attending. He also had several mistresses. Okay, and I actually think that's normal. I'd rather have the king have a couple mistresses than have him do what Henry VIII did in England. Okay. Pope Julius had a girlfriend, so what, okay? I'd rather have a guy with a couple girlfriends or mistresses than have a pedophile homo like the kind that have taken too much power in the Catholic Church and they're doing bad things, okay? Anyways, this is the Museum of French History in Versailles. It looks very much like the Louvre. But what's spectacular about it is, notice they have a gallery of the battles. So their major battles, they have all these paintings to show what happened. And this is a very good, very important thing. This is a country that is proud of its history. They say, our history as France is magnificent. Come and see our paintings, okay? And they also have paintings of the Crusades. And they're very proud of contributing to the Crusades to try to save the Holy Land, okay? So what I'm trying to say is they weren't a bunch of modern sissies and wussies, okay? They were proud of their history, proud of their culture, proud of their tradition. They didn't have a bunch of traitors trying to destroy their country saying, oh, you're evil, you're racist, you're colonial, you're imperialist. No, they said, we are great. Look at everything we have done. And that's the way a country should be. If you want a country to survive, you teach the people about the greatness of their ancestors so that the new generation might do something great themselves. If people don't understand the greatness of their ancestors, they're never going to do anything great themselves. So here's just one painting of the Palace of Versailles by an unknown artist, but to see it in real life, it's spectacular. Okay, and then here's, this will be the last slide for the talk today, and this is the Opera House banquet room in the Palace of Versailles. And this painting was from the 1800s, 1855 actually, and it was at the time they had provided a banquet for Queen Victoria of England, who was visiting France at that time. And it was hosted by Napoleon III of France. So anyways, I'm going to be doing more videos related to the content from this book, The French Mind, but I wanted to culturally set the tone. France and Paris were the Athens of Europe. Notice that France no longer protects itself, no longer is proud of its Christianity, and France is being destroyed. Notre Dame Church Cathedral was burnt, almost completely, it wasn't completely destroyed, but it was severely damaged. Other churches in France have been burnt down. The French people no longer protect and celebrate their Catholic religion, and they're being destroyed again. France is in severe decline, and it doesn't look like it's going to survive from what I've seen. I hope it does, but it doesn't look like it's going to make it, okay? France is under siege, and it is losing, okay? Anyways, this is it for today on the history of France. We'll come back next time. This is the end of part 3.